this conference such a success. After 2 decades of bloodshed and some of the worst poverty on earth, there are the first signs of fragile progress in Somalia. International aid has pulled Somalia back from the brink of humanitarian crisis. African Union and Somali troops have pushed al-Shabaab out of Mogadishu. But most important of all, as we heard repeatedly today, the Somali people themselves are taking steps to agree a successor to the transitional federal government, with a new government properly accountable to all of the Somali people. Supporting these efforts is not just right for the people of Somalia, it is right for the whole world. Because when pirates are disrupting vital trade routes and kidnapping tourists, and when radicalism is poisoning young minds and breeding terrorism, it is in all our interests to support the Somali people in taking back their country. Of course, there is no single solution that will help make all of the difference. This is a complex jigsaw puzzle where every piece has to be put into place. It's all about the patient work of helping the Somali people to rebuild their country from the bottom up. So today we have reached agreements in 7 key areas: on security, on piracy, on terrorism, on humanitarian assistance, on local stability, on a reinvigorated political process, and on international coordination. And I'm going to very briefly say a word about each one. First, security. Yesterday, the United Nations Security Council agreed Resolution 2036 that extends the mandate of African Union forces in Somalia beyond Mogadishu and increases the number of troops from 12,000 to 17,730. This was the first success, if you like, of this conference. It gives the African Union forces the resources they need to put al-Shabaab permanently into retreat. The next stage will be for the Somalis themselves to provide for even more of their security. Second, keeping up the pressure on piracy. Mauritius, Tanzania and the Seychelles have agreed to take pirates for prosecutions. Somaliland and Puntland will take back convicted pirates later this year for imprisonment. And just as there will be no impunity for pirates, there will be no impunity for those who fund them either, because of our new Centre for Coordinating Intelligence and Pursuing the Kingpins of Piracy. We've also agreed a new international task force on pirate ransoms, with the ultimate ambition of ending such payments and stopping this crime from paying. Third, on counter-terrorism, we all agreed to disrupt the travel and financing of terrorists in the region. This includes implementing the Financial Action Task Force recommendations on combating money laundering and financing of terrorism. Fourth, on humanitarian assistance, we've agreed to continue providing help to those in need, and today Britain is leading the way with extra money to help refugees in Kenya and Ethiopia. Fifth, on local stability, I'm delighted that Denmark, Norway, the United Arab Emirates and the Netherlands are joining us today in setting up a local stability fund. This is absolutely vital for those areas that have been freed of al-Shabaab control, to help people build a network of safer, better governed areas and show those people in areas still held by Shabaab that there is a better alternative. Sixth and most crucially, the political process. In the short term, all the measures that I've described to improve security, stability, development, they are all essential in the short term. But Somalia's long-term future hinges on the political will to forge a new and representative government. Today's conference has put new momentum into the political process. We've backed the Somalis' decision to end the mandate of the transitional federal institutions in August. This timetable will be stuck to. There will be no further extensions, and we will hold the Somalis to this. We'll act against those who stand in the way of the peace process, and we've also agreed the formation of a new government must be as inclusive as possible. Today's conference has given this real impetus. The Garaway principles agreed last week chart the route to a broad-based constituent assembly which will determine a new government for Somalia. 30% of its members will be women. All regions will be represented. Let me be absolutely clear. There will be no negotiation with terrorists, but there will be an opportunity via a proper program for those who are willing to reject violence and turn away from al-Shabaab to join the political process. The new government must be free from corruption and accountable to its people. So we've agreed to establish a new joint financial management board to make sure that the revenue from key assets is used for the good of Somali people. This This was something that British Somalis who came to Downing Street this week particularly pressed for. They're right, and I'm glad that it has been secured. Finally, we've agreed to reform the International Contact Group so there's no let-up in our focus in the months between now and the next conference in Istanbul in June. This conference, I believe, is the next stage in a long journey for the people of Somalia. There is a very real opportunity within our grasp. We must now follow through on all of the agreements we've reached today so that together we can make this conference a turning point in achieving greater stability, greater security, and greater prosperity for Somalia, for the region, and for the world. Thank you very much for listening. Very happy to take some questions. If you put your hands up, a microphone will come, and if you could say who you are and who you're directing your question to. Start with Glenn O'Gaza from Sky News.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. You said in your speech earlier that a phrase that I thought rang out: Somali children should be holding books, not guns. To achieve that, though, and to defeat piracy, you first of all surely have to comprehensively militarily defeat al-Shabaab. So the question is, will Britain and her allies inevitably be involved in airstrikes against their training camps and bases in Somalia in order to achieve that military defeat? And will the UK's contribution to AMISOM in terms of trainers and setting up a staff headquarters perhaps in Mogadishu, is that also an inevitable consequence of that wish? And I wonder if I could ask Prime Minister Abdiweli Mohammed Ali, if I may, would you welcome airstrikes against al-Shabaab training camps and bases inside Somalia? Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, look, there is a military campaign that is taking place against al-Shabaab. That is a campaign being waged by AMISOM, but also by the Kenyan forces and by Ethiopian forces. But I think part of what this conference is about is saying, yes, of course, there has to be that military pressure on al-Shabaab, but actually the future of Somalia does also depend on a proper political process. Those young people who take up guns for al-Shabaab, they need to be able to see that there is a future in a prosperous, stable Somalia that offers them what everyone wants, whether in the African world or the Arab world, which is a job and a voice. So the connection between the military action to put huge pressure on Shabaab, which has been happening, and the political process, the connection, they are two sides of the same coin. In terms of the second part of your question, the whole point about this is not something of Western troops getting involved in a campaign in another country. This is about the countries of the world and the institutions of the international community coming together to support people in Somalia and support the neighbors of Somalia. That is what we're talking about, and I think it's a very important lesson for us all to learn, and that is why we want to see, as I said, young people with books and not guns. Prime Minister.
We welcome targeted airstrikes against Al-Qaeda in Somalia. However, the protection of the safety and the lives and the property of the Somali people is also very important. Therefore, we have to avoid any injury or death of lives of the people of Somalia. However, we welcome again, as I said again, the targeted airstrikes against Al-Qaeda in Somalia. And reason being, Al-Qaeda in Somalia is not a Somali problem. It is a global problem, and it has to be addressed globally. So therefore, we have to have a common strategy against this common enemy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's have the gentleman back there.
Home Cable, London. My question is, what role does the UK see itself playing in Somalia, both in the short term and the long term? And another question is the security that they're providing now, is it a long term or the short term?
Well, the UK's role in both, particularly in the short term, the UK's role has been to help bring people together at this conference, and also we have been leading players in providing aid to the Horn of Africa to try and help prevent the famine. So we played a very big and positive role in that regard. I think in the longer term, what we want to see is a political process in Somalia, which of course we will support. We'll support as friends and as members of the international community. But as far as possible in the future of Somalia has got to be determined by its own people. So there is no selfish interest, no strategic interest here in terms of Britain in Somalia. It's saying what is happening in your country is affecting your people. It affects the rest of the world. We are here to help, to play a role in the short term that's more about development aid, but a role in the long term that I hope is about diplomacy and support and the normal relations between two countries. Gentleman here in the middle.
Adam Green from This Is Africa magazine at the Financial Times. I just wanted to ask specifically why the UK was mobilizing around this issue now. The conflict has been going for a long time. I just wondered if you could clarify what the reasons are for the mobilization at this particular time in this particular way.
Well, I've only been Prime Minister for a relatively short time. This, I think, is an important priority for Britain. I think if you look at areas of the world where there is danger and instability and problems that can affect us here in the UK, I think quite clearly the Horn of Africa is one of those areas. And so if we believe in a genuine national security approach, where we bring together our aid policy and we bring together our foreign policy and our domestic security policy, there's a very strong argument for saying that British effort to bring people together over the issue of Somalia is a sensible thing for our country to do. I particularly felt, one of the things that got me interested in this was obviously the appalling famine that took place, but also this issue of piracy and shipping, where clearly the whole of the world needs to come together and to put a stop to this appalling level of criminality. So it seemed to me that Britain could play a role as a permanent Security Council member, as a country that's kept its promises on aid and so has some genuine trust on that issue, that has a well-organized Foreign Office that can help bring people together, that has great contacts in the Gulf and in the African and Arab world. We could play a role in bringing people together with the United Nations and the African Union to try and go through all of these issues. And I think what's been remarkable about this conference is it's not just about aid, it's not just about development, it's not just about piracy, it's not just about terrorism, it's about all of those things. But at its heart is an understanding that none of those measures will work without proper political progress